Hi, we're back with Deep Images, and we are still covering zombies. So, I hope we're not boring you all to death with zombies, but or undeath. But we're here. I'm Henry Covert. I'm here with Rhiannon Clark, my co-host on this segment, and we have Nick Mays, who is new to the show. He appeared on our incredible session with the amazing Yvette Izan, a real life zombie slayer. Um, Anything you want to introduce yourself to the audience with, Nick, before we go on into the reviews?
No, I'm just gonna let you handle it. I'm new, so don't expect too much yet.
All right. Well, that was fair and humble. I appreciate that. Um, so yes, so zombies, undead zombies. We've covered a bunch of the we've covered some really obscure ones. We've covered some classics. So we just covered Reanimator. So I'm gonna do one which is definitely a classic. I don't think we could do a zombie series without doing George Romero. We have already done a Dawn of the Dead symposium on the channel. It was me and Bill Mulligan and Tim Tolbert and our former co-producer Kaylin Ireland, and it's our most successful episode. There's a two-parter, and there are two most successful episodes by far, which has really blew us away. So that's one of the reasons we wanted zombies. So there was also a poll I conducted on YouTube, community poll, and 30, what do you want to cover next? And I threw a five in there, and one was just zombies. And since we were already doing werewolves and vampires, and so 30 people, so 85% wanted zombies. Most of the rest wanted more interviews. We're getting to that, don't worry. So this is our first topic that's actually literally demanded by the audience. So that makes me feel good that people are watching. At least 30 people are watching. So so I'm going to do a classic. It's from 1985, same year as Reanimator, and it's a movie that was not very well regarded when it came out, which is just in hindsight insane, really. Um, but I guess people have expectations of sequels. So Day of the Dead, 1985 by George A. Romero, written and directed by. Um, it is the third in a series of zombie apocalypse movies. So these are the original zombie apocalypse movies. So this is Night of the Dead came out. Night of the Living Dead was 1968. So this movie came out before. I mean, Greg Nicotero, who produced Walking Dead, and Robert Kirkman, who created Walking Dead. I don't even know if they were born then. They may have been like toddlers. So unfortunately, they get a lot of credit that Romero deserved. I hate to be controversial here. No offense to Walking Dead fans, but Kirkman has really made a career out of someone else's concept. And it was an original concept at the time. Zombies were not an original concept. They were mostly voodoo related and supernatural. So Romero's the first one to say maybe something science fictiony happened, and they just speculated on it in the first movie. By the second movie, they don't mention how it happened at all. The movie I'm going to talk about, they go into a little bit of this, and it's kind of fascinating because the thing about this kind of premise is Romero is a world builder. He's a world builder with this. He has characters that are strong and powerful. I mean powerful as in strong, powerful as in their personalities. They're very well drawn characters. Um, but the characters are subordinate to the concept. They are within the concept, and that's the structure they live under. So in other words, if these people lived in this world, what would happen? How would it play out to its ultimate, you know, its ultimate terminal point? And in this movie, he gets just about to the terminal point. Um, so that's another thing I have to say I dislike about The Walking Dead because it had like five or six major protagonists over the course of its 11 seasons, and only two of them died, and I don't believe either of them were killed by zombies. So that's totally antithetical to Romero's. I mean, there's no way you would survive 11 years if you were out there fighting them. Now, if you were hiding and you could get away, but it's not
What
very.
kind of zombies were they? What kind of zombie
They
are
were
they? Were they
exactly like the
grass
Romero
zombies?
zombies. They were exactly the same. They they bit you, you become a zombie. They kill you, become a zombie. You can shoot them in the head and die. Exactly. It was. I mean, it could have taken place in the same world. And I think Kirkman, in his mind, thinks it does. There's only two problems. One is it doesn't use the logic and thinking through because instead of thinking through a map of a storyline that progresses, he's like, well, we've got to get another season out of this because it's a hit. So, and he's adapting his own comic book, which I personally did not like the comic book. The art was good. Um, because I felt the same way about the comic book. I was shocked that it became a series that was a gigantic mega world hit. And I've seen a tiny bit of the spin-offs to still going really. It's just they fractured it into three different series. And those characters are still alive. Um, so no disrespect to people who love the series or invested in those characters, but try being invested in characters that much and then having them suffer a fate that would probably really happen to them under this in this world. And that's what we have in Romero. So in the first movie, no one gets out alive. Second movie, Ben and Fran escape. They don't have a whole lot of helicopter fuel, and Fran's pregnant. So they're running low on ammunition. We never see them again. Sadly, I was hoping eventually those characters would come back or we'd know their fate. So in this movie, we'll talk about who does and doesn't get out alive and what the deal is. So by this time, like Dawn is probably within me and Tim Tolbert, producer on the show, we were talking about the time frame. So the first movie comes out in 1968, the next one 1978, but it's really only been maybe in that reality, maybe a year, maybe not even a year. So this whole thing is accelerated to that level. So now between dawn and day, we don't really know how long it's been between the time Peter and Fran go off in the helicopter and we're introduced to our new protagonist, a very strong woman character, Laurie Cardill plays, called Sarah. Sarah is probably the most. She's not my personal favorite. I'm kind of more into Ben and Peter, but not trying to be sexist. But Sarah is probably the strongest character as far as the her performance, her characterization, and the strength and resilience of a character who is a woman
Is
who's
she naturally? Is she naturally? Is it believable? Is she believably strong?
she is believable. I wouldn't want to get into her real life thing. But I mean, she was the daughter of Chili Billy Cardell, who was a DJ who worked on the first Night of the Living Dead. So this was all part of the
Wow,
same Pittsburgh scene, which Tim
amazing.
Tolbert now lives in that area, and he knows a lot of these people who are alive. He hasn't met, well, he might have met her, but he doesn't know Laurie yet. We may or may not try to approach Laurie for an interview. I mean, in a perfect world, it'd be great. But I do follow her on somewhat on Facebook. But I do think, yes, she's a very outspoken person. I'm just gonna leave it at that. But she in the movie is also very outspoken, and she needs to be because you got to advocate for yourself. Because basically, she plays a scientist who has had some military training just for the project. And what the project is they're underground. They appear to be most of the movie was shot in Pittsburgh. The location outdoors were shot in Florida. So apparently, the movie is set in Fort Myers, Florida, and there's a giant installation underground. And of course, it's deserted for miles around except for a few zombies. Um, and she is tasked with the other scientists to figure out what the hell they're going to do. How did it start? How can we stop it? How can we cure it? Whatever. Um, Unfortunately, I mean, it was a civilian project. It was put together. We learned this in the movie. It was put together very quickly, and the military were employed kind of basically as mercenaries, in order to enforce this this project. And as we open the movie, the latest leader of the military, Cooper, has died. I don't think we learn exactly how he dies. They had a funeral for him. I guess the implication is they shot him in the head so he wouldn't come back as a zombie. And they have a funeral for him. They all think he's a hero. And the military people here are very unsavory. So let me talk about the scientists and then I'll get into the military. And then you'll see why there's a schism which drives the movie. So there's Sarah. She's kind of like well, she's the star, but she's kind of like the most vocal of the scientists. Um, and then there's another guy named Fisher who works with her. And that's played by John Amplas, who played Martin in Romero's Martin, which is just one of my favorite movies. And he's a great actor. Another guy who's been in a lot of Romero projects, like in some fashion behind or in front of the camera. So Fisher and Sarah, and then there's another scientist, um, Dr. Logan, and he's the core, like he's the genius of the group. He's older. He's played by Richard Liberty, who was in The Crazies by Romero. Indelible performance. He's brilliant. He's funny. He's crazy, and he just works and toils on these zombies all day long. So essentially, since the zombies now are drawn to this place, like the interface where the thing comes up for the go into the base underground, it's like zombies can smell the living, flesh, meat, or whatever. They just seem to always be able to home in on it. So after a while, there's zombies all over the place outside, or as they say in the movie, in the wild, literally. So what they've decided to do is capture them. The military assists them in capturing them and bringing them down there so Dr. Logan can work on them and go deep into like their brains and every body function. Like why do they eat meat? Why do they eat human meat? Um, and I wanted to make a distinction here that some people don't make, but a distinction that's made in these movies is that they're not cannibals because cannibals feed on their own species. The zombies and humans are once the zombies come back to life, they're not human. They're a different species. So they're undead feeding on the living. So it's not exactly cannibalism, but it appears to be since we're talking about a human body eating another human body. Um, so Logan is trying to, he just basically is always a little bit, eccentric and fried, and his gloves are always covered with blood, and he's like digging really, well, in some ways, literally digging really deep into uh, the stuff, and that's when we get into some fascinating things. But first, let me tell you about the military. So the military is led by this guy named Captain Rhodes, played by Joseph Pilato. He passed away a few years ago. Really wonderful, sweet man. He was in some other Romero projects, but he really chews the scenery here. He's an indelible character. He's probably one of the most memed and imitated and quoted villains in any zombie movie. And I'll throw a few at you as we go along. But he's a fanatic. And so he takes over command after Cooper's dead, and he's got like about five other guys left. And according to the exposition, a couple of scientists have died, but more military people have died. They never had a whole huge amount of people there. So I'm going to stop and try to count them. I should have, but let's just say one by one. It's like Agatha Christie. And then there were none, but maybe not. Um, so Rhodes' two sidekicks, if you want to call them that, they're the most soldiers to get the most screen time are Steele, who's this big burly guy with a beard. He just talks smack constantly. He vulgar mouth, total misogynist, total pig. Asshole, racist. Um, over the course of the movie, you quickly realize that Rhodes is also a misogynist and a racist, but he's slightly more subtle. Not much. I mean, in other words, when he unleashes it, it's just mean and terse, man. Very, very funny, the lines. Whereas Steele is just ranting. And then his buddy, I forgot the other guy's name, but he's like a short, kind of chubby guy. He looks kind of like Dom DeLuise. He doesn't look like somebody that would be conscripted in the military, but in the middle of a zombie apocalypse, they would probably conscript anybody. So, um, so these guys have military training, and they're all like gung ho. Now, remember, this came out in 1985. This was the height of the Reagan era, the Rambo, and all this stuff. All we heard about was the USA and how we're going to lick and kill Russia and all these other countries, and how Iran Contra and all these illegal, nasty things that Reagan did in the global South were wonderful and great. And then we find out, when Oliver North goes on trial, we find out, no, they're all illegal and people were killed, and we were deposing governments. Um, but of course, Reagan never got impeached, of course, and Oliver North never went to prison, but he did testify, and I think one reason is because, well, of course, they're part of the system, they're wealthy. Part of the reason is because the public was behind them. Reagan was a very popular character, and people were caught up in this jingoism, of the
Was he an
xenophobia.
actor as well,
Huh?
Reagan?
He was an
Reagan, was
actor
he
in
an
the
actor?
beginning. Yeah, he began as an actor, and we actually covered on the show. Mr. C.F. Roberts covered The Killers very recently, which was his last performance as an actor, which came out 2 years before he was elected governor of California. And as governor of California, he was He was a good guy to have around when Nixon was running things, because he was a racist, he was a tyrant, and he tried to destroy the Black Panthers, which originated in Oakland, California. And they had a chant they would do sometimes: "Fuck Ronald Reagan, fuck Ronald Reagan." And to me, in hindsight, and a lot of people now, Black Panthers were heroic people trying to help their people against oppression and police brutality. But Reagan wasn't having that, man. So anyway, fast forward 1985, and I feel like Romero's always been a far left liberal and a social critic. Either his with each movie, his allegories get more blatant. Like, they're very low key in Night of the Living Dead, to the point where even he says some of that he didn't intend, but it can be read through it. Dawn of the Dead, it's very deliberate. This one is just very blatant. So some people dislike the fact that the military are cartoons, but honestly, if you ever met people like that in 1985, which I did, that is how they were. I mean, guys who were not in the military would talk that kind of shit about women and blacks and how many they want to, kick Russia's ass, and they love Reagan.
So it was authentic. So
it was authentic. It's just they amp it up
for the time.
Yes, they amp it up to the point where it's, dramatic. And it comes to me, it come across as funny because it is a satire. It shows how ridiculous these people are.
Yeah.
And Rhodes is like the personification, but these guys are kind of like the guys who just like mouth off because, and realistically, on one level, they've probably gone mad from being underground and having to deal with zombies all the time. So, I mean, their coping mechanism is to constantly talk about people's dicks and, and talk shit and, scream and yell and go woohoo. And I mean, that's really their way of dealing with reality, because their reality
is locker room vibe. A locker room vibe.
It is like a locker room, yeah. And I tend to think that most of the characters in this movie, not all, but most of the characters in this underground facility either always were insane or have gone insane from being there and from living under this apocalypse. So this apocalypse, like I said, they start talking about all the power, all the telecommunications on the mainland of North America being out, like gone, and a lot of the power gone. And so that gives you an idea that it is definitely more advanced in its stages than in Dawn of the Dead. So it could take place a year after Dawn of the Dead. It could take place 5 years, but I don't think it takes place quite 7 years. So it's a span between the movies.
I have something in my mind here. It's like there's no such thing as PC in an apocalypse.
No, there's not. No, that's a good point, because it's a free for all. I mean, however you can cope, you can cope,
Yeah, that's all.
And if you harm someone else will harm you. Karma comes pretty quick in these
situations. It's true.
Because it's one person out for themselves. And so this is an idea where the scientists in this facility, they feel that they're a community. I mean, they feel like I'm going to go ahead and start referring to him as the nickname Rhodes has for him, Dr. Frankenstein. I didn't want to slip and say it and be like, I thought you were talking about Dr. Logan. They're the same person. So that's how Rhodes is. He just has a crazy dialogue. And, come on, Frankenstein. So, everybody starts, even the other scientists start calling him Frankenstein just for shorthand.
He's a mad scientist.
Yes. And there are two other characters in this installation. One is Terry Alexander, who is an African-American actor playing a Jamaican man, a West Indies man, very, very perfect accent, and an Irish hard drinking man, played by Carloth Connolly, I think. I can't think of his name. I always get mixed because I get stuck on how unusual his first name is, but it's cool. I want to say his character's named Cassidy, but I might be wrong. He's kind of a character that's kind of there, but he only starts to really become more characterized as the movie goes on. He doesn't really do much in the beginning, but just kind of drink a lot. And that's his way of coping. He keeps a flask with him all the time. And occasionally
making everything Irish. This is coffee. It's Irish.
Yeah,
this is
exactly.
Tea. Irish.
Irish cream. And occasionally he makes a wisecrack, which is funny. And he's very cynical, but he's also very kind. And him and John, the reason John is there is he is the helicopter pilot. So if they need to escape, like in Dawn of the Dead, they've got him. And a callback to Dawn of the Dead is in that movie, the original helicopter pilot was Steven, and Peter nicknamed him Flyboy, kind of derisively. So in this movie, the military, like Rhodes calls him Flyboy. So in this movie, there is a Flyboy, but he's a different character. Um, and Cassidy is like the communications guy. So he's the guy who can, that might not be his name, but I'm just gonna say it for now. All these people are gonna hate me. But he is the because I don't want to keep saying the Irish guy who drinks a lot. That's just ridiculous. So
Yeah.
anyway, no offense to Rhiannon. But I mean it's like
No,
it's
like
like
they're making a stereotype. They're doing a stereotype. Okay.
yeah, and they are doing a stereotype of what's they both are. They're both archetypes. The West Indies guy, they kind of imply he's into reggae, but they're real people. The things they say are not bound by their culture. Their accents, other than their accents, they don't like talk about their cultures because their cultures are gone. They're gone now.
That's a good point. Yeah. That's a
Um,
good point.
and actually, that's addressed also in the movie. That he's meticulous, Romero. He covers everything you could imagine. Like, what if this? What's going on with it? And he's got an answer. He lets you know. And one of the things is this Cassidy guy is in charge of the communications. But what he's found is that a lot of this equipment that they had in this installation under Florida, dates back to the Second World War. This guy's working on this old equipment, and so he can't get in touch with anybody anymore. He said, and they were like, well, we used to be able to get in touch with Washington. And some of them think Washington, there's still an operational, not a government exactly, but what's left of the government, what's left of the people in Washington are trying to, I guess, not necessarily run the whole country, but just keep some kind of order and try to figure out what to do to dispatch units to save people from the zombies, kill the zombies. But it's strongly implied as the movie goes on, partly because the characters, almost all the characters are very cynical, except Sarah, is that there's no Washington D.C. There's no government left at all, you know. Um, and if they have no
Like
power,
Logan's Run.
yeah. And in this one, it's just like totally. So it's kind of a hopeless situation, and they talk this over, and basically they put all the stock into Dr. Frankenstein because uh, he was their star person when they set up the operation, and it's like maybe he can do a breakthrough that can save us in some way, and or at least minimize the damage. It won't bring our way of life back, but it might keep us alive, and we might be able to get rid of the zombies possibly. Um, so his experiments like go deep into the brain, and he explains what these zombies are. Like they never explain how it happened. Once again, they kind of they don't go there, but it's basically one of them wants to still know how it happened as a way to figure it out, how to solve it. The other person wants practicality, like, okay, we're here, what do we do now? And I think that Sarah is the more the person who wants a practical solution. um, she's not convinced that his research is going to save them, but she's not against him either. The military doesn't like any of the scientists, of course, and so you have this whole class divide. This whole like the jocks versus the nerds, almost kind of, which was a big theme in the '80s movies. And so Dr. Frankenstein, he goes deep into the brain of these zombies, and he finds out that the zombies like he disconnects all of the digestive tract of a zombie, and the zombie still tries to bite him. The zombie's shackled, and he said, "Why is he trying to bite me? He can gain no nourishment from me, no sustenance." He said, "It's an instinct. It's a primordial." He says a deep primordial instinct. He said it is our ancestors, the reptile brain, the remnants of it in the limbic system. And so in that case, he says there's this little bit of jelly, that carries the DNA, RNA, or whatever, that is like the reptile brain. That's what motivates the zombies. Like all of their
The
higher function,
amygdala.
yeah, yes, all of their higher function, like cerebral cortex, that's all gone. But this keeps them moving. This keeps them wanting to do things, wanting to eat
That
people.
makes sense.
It's like a weird mode. And again, it's not a proven theory, but it's the closest that we have in the series so far. But despite that, Frankenstein also believes that there may be part of the cerebellum that's still alive in there, that still remembers who they were. And they kind of hint a little at that in Dawn of the Dead, but they never show it. They hint at it because they say this is why they're coming to the mall, because maybe they remember it's an important part of their lives, which is also making fun of American culture at that time. Um,
Consumerism, yeah.
and this one, they do show unequivocally that some zombies do remember their past lives, and this is explored in one of the later Romero zombie movies, but we won't get into that right in the moment. But um, there's a special specimen that Frankenstein has that he's nicknamed Bub, which was the nickname his father had, and he had this guy had daddy and mommy issues. Frankenstein, I mean, and apparently his dad was like a scientist, and these rednecks around him nicknamed him Bub and made fun of him, and that's kind of obviously, you know. Now Frankenstein is at odds with these same kind of men who are running this show, and he's not afraid of them. The other people are kind of afraid of him. He's not afraid of them at all. He just believes he can just talk them down. And to his credit, he really manages to give them a lot of verbal smackdowns to where Rhodes really can't say anything because he's an idiot and this guy's a genius. And so his star pupil Bub is shackled and he is training him. And he's not extremely decayed. He's like, he is really cool. Anybody's seen the movie or seen the posters or memes, he's an iconic looking character. You'd all know Bub. And Bub does show cognitive functions beyond any zombies they've seen. He does try to shave when he's given a razor, and of course he cuts his, already decaying flesh. And he tries to read a book, not read it, but he opens it and flips the pages. And it's a Stephen King book in joke. Who worked with Romero? It's a Graveyard Shift, I think, and I think that's it. And he's trying to read it, and he knows, like, he's starting to understand the function of certain things. Like he even records voice. Frankenstein gives him a tape recorder, which, this is the kind of tape recorder we had back then. It's about this big, and you had a handle, all these buttons, and he presses it to hear this voice. And what he does is he put headphone on him, and he plays him Beethoven. And Bub's like this. Now, Bub's eyes are deliberately not either obscured or made up. I mean, the actor, he looks like regular human eyes, which a lot of them do, but he actually, you can tell there's something going on behind his eyes. So they deliberately, I think, did not put a lot of makeup here. They make him look a little more human or empathetic. And when he hears the music, he's like kind of like this, and so it's affecting him on this primal level. And it's, and then Frankenstein shows him how to turn on and off the tape recorder, so he knows how to do that. So that kind of subplot percolates. And the other main plot line, like the A plot, is Sarah and the military and trying to round up the zombies for Frankenstein. Sarah has a boyfriend, forgot to mention, he's one of the soldiers. He's this Hispanic guy, and I don't know if this was intentional or not. And I've seen the actor talking, and I still can't figure it out. But though he looks totally different now, but he had like long hair and a beard, and he's real scruffy. But this guy, I think his name is Manuel or something, but he's an asshole kind of because he's been driven totally insane because he's the only soldier who's not like super macho. And they all make fun of him for being not super macho. They make fun of him for being Hispanic. They call him Spit constantly and yellow and all this stuff. And him and Sarah at some point in this project have fallen in love or had an affair, or they're kind of sort of in a relationship. But the thing that's weird is that he's extremely gay and flamboyant acting. So I don't know. And I tried to watch the actor in a modern interview, and he was a little bit, but he was so low key. And now his head's shaven. He looks totally different. He's a lot older. And I was like, so is he just like, did Romero say just don't play it straight, pardon the pun. But he
He could
doesn't.
be bisexual.
He could be. He doesn't play it straight, but it's an interesting angle because the other soldiers, they want a shot at Sarah because she's the only female there, and
Oh yeah.
and ironically, the effeminate, impotent one to them is the one having sex with her. So
Oh yeah.
that just creates more, anger and angst.
Tension. Yeah.
Yes. And so this guy, he's kind of a nut. I mean, and you don't know how much of it was he was a nut before this happened or before he met Sarah. But not only does he not handle things well, but he treats her very badly. He actually does beat her a little bit, which is uncomfortable to watch. I mean, when I say beat her, like
Uncool.
slaps the hell out of her and then slaps the hell out of her again. He calls her a bitch and all this stuff that no character would be allowed to do in this movie without a comeuppance nowadays. But for those who hate him for those things, he does get karma. But
Yes,
on
he's
another
great.
level, he does some heroic things we'll get to. Um, I think the implication is he truly is just insane. And yes, maybe he's a closeted gay and has troubles with women, and there's no time to work all that out in a zombie apocalypse. So
No.
it's kind of a complex character, and I think the actor does the best he can. I don't think he's one of the better actors in the movie. I do think he's a little too stereotypical the way he delivers. But no offense to the guy, I don't can't remember the actor's name, but he's there for a reason. Obviously, there's a plot device. There's a reason why Sarah's with this guy, and this whole thing that one of the military is the only woman. I mean, one of the scientists is the only woman having sex with the only non-macho member of the military. So it kind of encapsulates this whole, like you said, tension. And they have to round up zombies and he's not good at it. He's like having a nervous breakdown. He's starting to freak out and they have to save his ass, and then they threaten to kill him because he got another guy killed because of his actions. And so one more down in the military, and uh, uh, Sarah tries to console him and give him sedatives, and he talks shit to her about, I'm not gonna let you dope me. I'm not gonna let you dope me up, you know. And I mean, I don't mean to be stereotypical. I mean, it's just I'm a very this is a
He
queer
plays it
friendly
camp.
this is a
Plays it
queer
camp.
friendly channel. I just want to make it clear we're
Yeah.
allies, but this actor
Yeah.
does kind of flame it up a little bit. And again, like I said, I don't know why Romero didn't rein him in unless he did it on purpose. So anyway, he and also I think a bad stereotype that may have influenced the writing and acting is that, you know, during that period, men who were effeminate or not very macho were considered to be gay. Like I was called a fag all through school, almost every single day, because I wasn't like jumping on women, and like drinking and trying to rape
You're
them.
a bit sensitive if you're artistic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Introverted.
he's kind of that's kind of it. He's kind of personification of that to me. Now, of course, as you get older and things get deeper, you can kind of look at these other layers. But Sarah's still trying to help him, and it's really heartbreaking to her. And she's very empathic. She's very empathetic. You can tell she's a kind-hearted person, but she's also a very strong person because when he has trouble rounding up the zombies, she just jumps in and grabs the pole and just pulls them in. And they tell her, "Don't get in here, lady." And she's like, "I've done this a dozen times. Shut up."
Come on.
And
Yeah.
she talks shit to all the soldiers all the time. Um, and so finally they call a meeting, and this basically Rhodes' way of saying, "I'm in command," just so I can like be in this audience of my megalomania. And he tells Lori, that's the actress. He tells Sarah he wants her to sit down because she's like, I'm tired of this. I'm leaving, and he basically threatens to murder her, have her shot if she doesn't sit down. And everybody, the army guys think they're joking, and he actually holds the gun on his best friend in the army, Steele, and orders him to kill her. And he's not joking at all.
Mm.
And so Steele doesn't really want to, probably because he wants to have sex with her later. That's probably the only reason. But he doesn't want to. Um, but he's getting ready to. And then Sarah's like, "Okay, I'll sit down." So, and she tells him to fuck off. And the whole thing is that Rhodes doesn't believe in the research. He uses all this crazy slang to talk about how stupid it is. And he's like, "I'm the one running this funny farm now, Frankenstein. Y'all are just jerking each other off. There's no results to this. I don't want zombies to do nothing but drop over. They're dead. They're fucking dead."
Just kill them. Stop studying them.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, what he's saying is true, but because it kind of is hopeless. But again, that's where the viewer, like, think and go and discern and go, well, okay, so what do they do? What would you do? Um, and so they go into the field again, and the Sarah's boyfriend gets bitten by a zombie because he's kind of loses his balance. He's kind of out of it, and he gets bitten in the arm. And she actually he runs through the facility and gets to the part where Cassidy and John live, and they kind of help her out because basically, I mean, this all happens very fast. I hope this was very realistic, but also this is a very disturbing scene when I first saw it. So it's still a little disturbing. So her boyfriend has been bitten here, and he's like freaking out because he's already going crazy. He's like, "Ah!" And Sarah takes John's machete and she chops his arm off. And then she says, "Give me fire." And she puts her own shirt on a pole and they light it and she cauterizes it. And, he's like totally, ah. And, of course, wow, how could you do that to your own boyfriend? Damn. But she's trying to save his life. It's like, so the contagion or the bite doesn't spread. And, of course, the soldiers don't believe it. They're like, "I've seen 1,000 of them. He'll be back as a zombie." There's never any evidence whatsoever that he'll come back. It looks as though Sarah succeeded at what she did. Um, but while after it's all playing out and they put the boyfriend to bed and get the soldiers off their back, and she's just like this. I mean, it's a great performance.
In
And,
shock.
and John is like, "Are you okay, Sarah?" And she's like, "Huh," and she just like falls over and hugs him and is crying. And it's just like, wow. It's just like, how much can a person do, and endure and have to do to
She's a
survive?
strong woman. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, yes.
So
They
just
put her through it.
absolutely. And to speed it along, um, things start to play out to where the military knows about Bub and they wonder why Bub's being given these rewards. Now, one thing we found out during his experiments, only Sarah found out, is that one of the corpses that he's experimenting on is Cooper, Major Cooper. And so they used the zombie they shot in the head and put it in his casket. So he actually uh was a zombie and he was apprehended and Frankenstein experimented on him and he basically cut away almost his entire head except his spine and his brain and some nerves because he wanted to make a point about the brain. And he was going to do this experiment anyway. And he does it. And then Sarah's like, "They're going to kill you, if they find out you killed the commander." He's like, "They're never going to know." He's like, "Besides, Cooper's doing us much more good here than he ever did alive," which is hilarious because
Ah.
because apparently they all hated him, but Rose is even worse. So, um, basically, he's feeding Bub pieces of Cooper. He's got him in the freezer after he takes him off the table, and he still has some of his military garb on, and it says Cooper. He should have got burned that. That was just very stupid. But unfortunately, they do. Learn that Bub is getting rewards like any Pavlov dog kind of thing for his behavior. And you find out that the Frankenstein himself had this kind of upbringing that's why he's a little crazy because his parents did this to him. They're like, "We're going to do this for you. You do this for us and we'll give you a reward." And he starts to occasionally be like, "It must be rewarded. Civil behavior must be rewarded. This is the foundation of society. Otherwise we'll roam around like wild beasts." And everything he's saying is true. And he's totally right. And he does manage to shut up Rhodes a few times. Like, because Rhodes is like, "Yeah, we're going to shoot them all." And he's like, "Where are you going to go? Where are you going to go?" He says it like, "Where are you going to go? They outnumber us 400,000 to one." He said, "The human race is, almost extinct." He's like, "Shooting them all in the head should have happened years, when this began. We should have done that." He says, "Too late. We don't have the ammunition to shoot them all." And so Rhodes doesn't know what to say because he's right. I mean, where is he going to go? And so he's very frustrated and mad. So when he finds out Frankenstein is feeding parts of his old boss to Bub as reward,
Heartbreaking though, still.
yeah, I mean, it's
Even if
overkill.
it's
In the 80s, everybody had a machine gun like Rambo. And he kind of parodies
yeah.
that in this movie, like the shots, like how many shots there are, like how many fired shots and these shots that are the way they're composed. And so Rhodes just basically takes a machine gun, wasting ammunition they need, and shoots Frankenstein, oh, I don't know, 30, 40 times with a machine gun. So,
Is that him dead then? Is
huh?
that him dead then?
Yes,
Frankenstein's
I
dead.
think one of the bullets did hit him in the head, so he doesn't come back as a zombie, but um yeah, it was overkill. So now Rhodes goes crazy and he says, basically, "I'm taking control of all you people, every single one of you." And essentially he says, "I don't want anybody bother questioning me." And Fisher, one of the scientists, starts questioning him and he's like trying to get John to fly them out of there. And John's like, "I'm not going to do this." And he's like, "You're going to do it or I'm going to start killing these scientists. I don't need them." And he's like, "I can't do this, Rhodes." And so Rhodes just blasts him. I mean, it's like one of those early examples in cinema, which Marksman and I talked about in some of our work videos, that you see a lot now, but you didn't see a lot in the 80s. Just this sudden death, no music cue, sympathetic character, it just happens like in real life. And it's to me, that it's very realistic, but also very incredible, very, very powerful. And so John is like repulsed, and he's like, you're gonna have to kill me, man. You're gonna have to kill me, man, before I go with you in the whirly bird. That's what he said. And so they take their weapons and they beat him up some, and that's when you learn that basically, he's like pound some sense in his jungle bunny ass. You learn that he's a total racist, and they're enjoying beating him up. But don't kill him, we need him. We don't need these other people. And so they're gonna basically kill Sarah and Cassidy. So they go on the run, and he corners them in a zombie pen. Somehow they get out. They manage to get out, and they're running through this chamber. They have no weapons, and it's in the dark. So basically, it's just they've got to run fast, and they've got to take whatever pieces of wood they grabbed from that enclosure and bonk the zombies over the head. Uh, but the good thing is, John wakes up, and when he wakes up, um, I'm trying to remember what this is. What's weird is something knocks out the soldiers, and I'm trying to think of who and what does it exactly. But Rhodes does get knocked out, and he takes all their guns. Not Steele, he has a machine gun, but the Rhodes and this other guy, one of the incidental soldiers that's left, and he takes all their guns. So now like John's like two gun kid, and he saves Sarah and John and blows all the zombies, and it's a lot of cool effects, like because when they're trying to survive, there's a shovel in the hallway, and like you were talking about shovel earlier. In this one, like this, he knocks the zombie down, he puts the shovel in his mouth. I'd never seen
Oh
this
yeah.
effect ever. He cuts him all the way through. Top of his head flips off. Now his brain hasn't been shot, so as they're running off, you
Wow.
see the upside down part of the head, eyes blinking, and doing this. So it's
Jeez.
pretty amazing.
He American history axes him with this shovel.
Yeah, it didn't work. The curbside didn't work with this one. He's still alive, but he can't do anything. But this was, Tom Savini did all the effects in this movie. I probably not should have mentioned that already. He's a brilliant genius of effects. He was in Vietnam, and he knew a lot of anatomy and medical stuff. So his stuff looked more real than most of what was happening in gory movies at that
Wow.
time. And this is Greg Nicotero and Howard Berger. They were his assistants. And after this, they formed their own studio, K&B. And like I said, Nicotero produced The Walking Dead. So for all The Walking Dead's flaws, the zombies do look pretty incredible. They look accurate. They just don't use them as much, and it's a zombie show. But how it goes. But anyway, so yeah, so Rhodes is freaking out. They're all trying to get away. Blah blah blah, and it looks like Sarah and these other two cats are gonna get away somehow, if they can get to the helicopter, which only John knows how to fly. And this is where I think Manuel is his name. This is where the crazed boyfriend comes back into the picture. He doesn't have any dialogue. He doesn't say anything. This is one of those movies. This is literalists, which is what I call them. We call them on the channel literalists. They would hate this movie because it'd be like, what is he doing? Why is he doing it? And it's like, just watch it.
Suspend your disbelief.
But not even that. It's cinema. It's like, why
Yeah,
you're watching someone walking down the street. Why do you need to be told they're walking down the street? With your own
yeah, that's
eyes,
true.
you're seeing what they're doing. I mean, why are you,
Agree.
and so, but we don't know his exact motives, but we can pretty figure them out after what's happened to him. He's just basically gonna destroy everybody, and he doesn't care anymore.
I
So
know.
he destroys the elevator thing to where they can't get out. And then he goes up top, and he opens the pen with the zombies, and he runs to the elevator opening, and he's got the remote control thing, and they start eating him alive. And this is where the real gore starts to come in, because in all these movies he has like a feeding scene, which is almost like a climactic sex scene in a porno, or a climactic action set piece, where you have this extended, the movie slows down for about 5 or 10 minutes, and it's just the zombies eating, and it's just gross as hell. So this one is way more than Dawn of the Dead. It looks real. It's really disgusting. Um, and yeah, they're tearing him apart, and he pushes the button. But before he pushes the button, one thing that slows him down, but he knows he's going to die anyway, is he's apparently he's Spanish, he's Catholic. He does this kind of cross. like, and he's like, he's gonna do what he needs to do. He has this little pendant that's like Mary or Jesus, and so he starts chewing on it because of the pain. And he presses the button, and then we don't see him again because, well, we do see him again, but we just see his body parts. We never see his head again or him again. But so they come in and they're all underground. And so these four soldiers can't get away. And so the incidental soldier, he's killed off pretty fast. And he's bitten and he tells Steele, I don't want to become this. And so, he shoots him as a mercy killing. And then it's down to three, but Rhodes escapes with this little funny thing that he rides on that you can ride around the installation with. And then they're all mad and they're like, these guys' frustration is growing. Now, these two guys still have guns, but they're like total morons. And they start to lose it because something we talked about on one of the sessions on zombies recently was the movies where you establish that shooting in the head will destroy them. And then the characters learn that, and then some characters seem to forget it in the next scene and just start shooting them indiscriminately.
Random parts of the body.
Yeah, like a machine gun, just swath, without targeting them. And that's kind of what these guys do. But I think to me, it's clear that it's because they've lost their minds. Because, I mean, Steele doesn't do it consistently. He does a little out of frustration, but he still has a handgun. And when he's close enough to when he does shoot it right in the head. The other guy, the guy who's kind of like the Dom DeLuise, comic relief, weird guy, talks about everybody's dick all the time and shit. He's he just keeps shooting, he keeps shooting, and of course they overwhelm him, and you get the first giant gore set piece of the movie is he's screaming and they start to tear him apart and they open up here, all of his intestines start to come out. Now, of course, he's still alive. I don't know how this ever happens. This is where you have to suspend disbelief, because in these movies and in many horror movies since, characters get wounded to where they would at the very least go into a coma, if not die, but they're still alive and cognizant while their body's being ripped to pieces. That's a great fear, though, I think probably someone would have. Think what that would be like, and I think that he's the first director who was like, well, that's not going to kill them. They're going to actually start seeing their body torn apart, and still be alive for a little bit. And so they tear him apart. And what's cool is he's screaming and laughing because he's gone totally nuts. And when they tear his throat open,
My God.
further they pull it, the pitch of his voice goes up, which is kind of funny. Like it's like So that's taking care of that guy. So Steele, he finally tries to fight off the zombies. He can't get Rhodes, and he, ends his own life. And you can tell that in his mind he has some kind of honor or some kind of code. And but Rhodes by this time is just, frantic. He can't get out of this place, and the others are trying to get to the helicopter. So for a while, you don't actually see what the other three are up to because you get so caught. Obviously, Romero did too. They got so caught up in what's going on with these army guys because this is where all the big, gory things happen. And so Rhodes, it goes down the hallway, and Bub sees him. Now Bub has gotten out of his shackles, and he's seen the dead Frankenstein, and he's sad. He's almost crying. So in his zombie now sort of aware mind, he kind of sees Frankenstein as his mother, basically, the way I see it.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Ugh." And so Bub, they've established earlier that Bub he showed him how to fire a gun. And because they established that he was in the military, and when he was alive, they don't know his original name. And he actually saluted, he taught him to salute, and he saluted Rhodes. And of course, Rhodes was like, I don't want this walking piece of pus saluting me. What is, And Rhodes just has constant creative profanity. So Bub takes the little gun with him. He's hanging off his finger, and he sees Rhodes, and he shoots him. He shoots him at him a couple of times, and at first he misses, and then he hits him. He hits him up here, and he can't use his arm too well. And then he's running down the hallway, and this is where the performance goes into the stratosphere. Like he's dragging along the hallway, blood, and he's like, "Come on, come on!" He's like totally. He's like, "You puss fuck," He's just like, and totally over the top. And finally, Bub shoots him again in the leg, and then he's like crawling, and he's like, "Yeah, come on, man!" Yeah,
Is that all you got?
He's defiant to the end, and literally. And so then Bub sees him, and he opens up the door and he's forgotten. Well, he didn't know, but by the time they got to this part of the complex, that the zombies had killed the other soldiers. So when he opens the door, they're all in front of him, like dozens and dozens and dozens of zombies. So he turns around and Bub shoots him in the chest, and it's probably going to be a near fatal wound. But when he does it, Bub salutes him and walks away. So there's some humor in this. And then we get into the
Yeah.
big gore set piece, is his death, which you've all been waiting for because everyone hates Rhodes. And again, he's still alive. And they pull his entire body open here. They rip off the lower half of his body, and you see them dragging it. He's still alive, barely. And this is because this would never happen. Totally unrealistic, but it's funny, memorable. So as they're doing that, and then they're coming in on him, he's like, choke on him, choke on him, like choke on my entrails, you motherfuckers.
Yeah.
Defiant to the very end. Of course, he would never have been conscious after they ripped him in half, but it's pretty funny, and it is very realistic gore, but it's also a little cartoonish because it's so over the top and stuff. But to speed it up, they get away, and they do find an island, but we don't really learn much of what's happening except that she's marking a calendar. She still knows what day of the month it's November, and March Sunday is November 1st. So we could probably figure out what year this is supposed to be set in if we really researched it. And then that's it. The three of them get away in this movie. So that's a step up from Dawn of the Dead. And I think that fans have tons of theories. My personal theory is that they do what John mentioned earlier, which is that we should all get together, go on an island, make some babies, and repopulate the human race. So, one of the persons interviewed on the disc, which I have right here, by the way. This is the Shock Factory disc. Look at that horrible glare. That's
Yeah.
it. There's Bub with the gun at the top.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
He says, we could repopulate the world, and one of the interviewers on this disc during the documentary says, Sarah biblically is like a mother of part of humanity, in her era. So I believe that Sarah will repopulate the earth. She'll be the mother of Cassidy and John's children, and they'll have like a commune on this island. He didn't mention the commune part. I just threw that in because that seemed to be where he was going.
No, it's logical. It's logical.
It is, and I like to think that's what happened. I think if Romero had lived, I think he probably would have eventually made a movie that showed the fate of the survivors of Dawn and Day, because all the actors are still alive. So, but unfortunately he passed before everybody else. So that's kind of Day of the Dead. For those who haven't seen it, you've got to see it. Most people watching most zombie things have seen it at least once, or at the very least, they've seen the other ones and want to see it. It was hated when it came out. The critics hated it. I remember Roger Ebert said it was just too much, too violent. Roger Ebert, I have a great writer and critic, but I have many, many, many issues with him. Rest in peace. And, no offense to him, but he said a lot of things that I just think are ridiculously wrongheaded about movies, some of which he did retract late in life. Bless his heart. But because he loved Dawn of the Dead.
That's why I think you should always watch a movie and make up your own mind.
Absolutely.
Whether you like it or not.
Exactly.
Don't just go off of a critic.
Yeah, because we're at this channel, we're just exposing you to the movies and giving you our interpretation. So by all means, watch the movies, and you might be typing, like, when this goes up in a week or two, you're going to be like, Henry doesn't know fuck about what really Day of the Dead's about, And if you can give me an argument as to why you think that, I'll listen. If you not, I'll just delete your post or call you an idiot. But so it's kind of like it is a heavy movie, and it has an ending that has a kind of pop reggae-ish synth soundtrack that even has female vocals near the end that are kind of about eternal love or whatever. I kept expecting it to be like Day of the Dead, but no, the lyrics have nothing to do with it. That would have been too silly. So it's very 80s in that sense too. The ending of the movie, the last shots, and the music, it's very 80s. And I guess you could say, even though the movie is the bleakest of the three by far, it's also the most hopeful at the ending. As hopeful as you can be, So yes, highly recommend
because people
it.
got away, and because people got away.
So, Rhiannon, if you have not seen it or don't remember it, I suggest you track it down when you can, because I think you will.
Uh,
A lot of the things you said about gore effects during Reanimator totally apply here. I
yeah.
was thinking exactly you're on the right
I
track,
have a love. I have a love for gore done right, you
right?
know, or even just done creatively, you know.
But anyway, so we're gonna wrap up Day of the Dead. So I hope everyone's happy with this, and if not, let us know. Um, so I guess we're gonna say goodnight.
We
What do you
we
think?
enjoy what we're doing. So
We do, and we'd like you to like and subscribe, please. We're trying to get to 500. We're like a hair from 500, and then we're gonna head right to 1,000 subscribers, and then we'll be recognized on a lot more platforms. So thank you for watching. You have anything you want to say to the audience, Nick?
No, I'm happy listening this time.
All right, bro.
Thanks
Take
for
care.
having me.
Thank you.
And it's true that we cannot see that far behind. If we looked all the way in the past, we'd go blind. In the night, from the stars as they've all lived their lives, and the light that they gave as they burned and then died.